time to get the hatches open. I want to thank you for sticking around. We knew you couldn't stay away, and now you're here to see these new crew members move their way on board the International Space Station. We're coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, as we've been doing since earlier this morning when we saw a Soyuz spacecraft lift off from the other side of the world. The teams here, the Orbit 2 team led by Flight Director Ed Van Cise, still on console, overseeing the systems and getting ready to welcome 3 new crew members on board the International Space Station. They've been working throughout the day in concert with a team of flight controllers on the other side of the globe in the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov, just outside of Moscow. And all of these teams have been working together and watching, starting off with a flawless ascent from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, as 3 crew members, Alex Kropochka, the Soyuz commander and Russian cosmonaut, on board, along with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir and UAE United Arab Emirates astronaut Hazza Al Mansoori, lifted off earlier this morning atop their Soyuz rocket. They took off right on time at 8:57 a.m. Central Time. It was 6:57 p.m. in the evening over in Baikonur. That Soyuz FG booster, all 3 stages performing flawlessly and delivering them into their initial orbit. It was only about an 8-minute and 45-second ride uphill. First stage doing its job, second stage kicking in, and then the third stage delivering them the final leg of the journey into the initial orbit before the Soyuz spacecraft separated and they began their chase down of the International Space Station. They were able to arrive just under 6 hours later, eventually lining up and docking with the Zvezda service module, the very aft port to the very back part of station, which for this maneuver had actually been swung around 180 degrees to the front just to give good lighting on that docking port. That docking coming a few minutes early, actually docking at 2:42 p.m. Central Time, 3:42 p.m. Eastern, 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Since that docking, they've been on board the Soyuz spacecraft still, and they've gone through a number of different procedures. First, after that docking, the hooks on both the Soyuz and the space station itself engaged to lock the vehicle in place, and then since then they've been going through what's known as leak checks. So there is a space between the hatches on the station and the Soyuz side, known as the vestibule. Normally it's exposed to outer space when there's nothing docked, but now there's a tight seal between the 2 vehicles that creates a space that needs to be pressurized. So right now the crew is actually taking air from inside station and putting it in that vestibule to then give them a pressurized pathway between the Soyuz spacecraft and the station itself. They're going to continue wrapping those up over the next hour or so until we get these hatches open. We're anticipating hatch opening at about 4:45 p.m. Central Time, but it could be earlier or a little bit later depending on how quickly they're able to step through all of these different leak checks. Before we get into all of that, though, we did have a few folks down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan give a post-docking news conference, specifically Dmitry Rogozin, the head of Roscosmos, and he was joined by NASA counterpart Ken Bowersox, who's the acting associate administrator for the human exploration operations for NASA. Why don't we go and take a look at that press conference now? And we're just going to stand by for a minute. We should be getting a replay of that momentarily. Again, this is going to be a post-docking press conference that took place at the Baikonur Hotel in Kazakhstan. This involving Dmitry Rogozin, the head of Roscosmos, and Ken Bowersox, NASA's acting associate administrator for human exploration operations. Several of these officials, including Rogozin, also got a chance to call the crew members right after they docked.
We estimate the end of this year by middle of next year, there's a very good chance that we'll launch with crew with those vehicles. What's most important, though, is that we launch them when they're ready. We want to have a high chance of success when we launch those vehicles. And then after we've proven them, we're looking forward to having some of the American astronauts fly in a Soyuz and some of our Russian partners fly with us on the commercial crew vehicles.
А российские космонавты начнут летать на американских коммерческих кораблях.
Will start flying on commercial vehicles.
Мы сегодня испытывали некоторые волнения на заседании Государственной комиссии. У нас была информация, заседание Госкомиссии утром проходило, была информация о превышении скорости ветра на высоте до 12 километров. Значит, выходили параметры, и наши прогнозы строились на дополнительных проверках, дополнительные зонды, которые показали, что скорость ветра идет на убыль. Эта тенденция,
and it was shown to us that the wind speed was going to decrease.
К моменту уже пуска, соответственно, все было в
And by the time for launch, everything was normal. As to the vehicle systems,
я стараюсь сам приезжать на каждый пуск лично.
I try to arrive to every launch myself to support the specialists and to encourage them to test and retest, not to trust themselves too much. And this is the last launch for the launch vehicle of this particular series. And we have a feeling like at the end of the year, by the end of December, you're thinking that you left something undone and thinking of questions to ask yourself. But the launch went perfectly. And we reported everything to our US colleagues who are also present during launches. And if there were any snags, we would eliminate them as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you anything interesting. Things were nominal, about which I'm very happy, except for the wind speed. The crew was in excellent condition. I talked to them yesterday, and we were joking around. We have a mixed crew. Some of them are launching for the first time, and some of them, as Oleg, are launching for the third time. But the mood of the crew was high, and the level of confidence was high. What else could I say? Today there was a moment with our Arab colleagues. We signed a contract with our Arab colleagues about 1 hour before we had an accident. And I wanted for this launch to go picture perfect, and it did.
Rob Navius from NASA Television for Ken Bowersox. Ken, you had an opportunity in 2003, 16 and a half years ago, to land in a Soyuz vehicle to complete Expedition 6. Just curious about your impressions today as you watch that launch at sunset and this effortless and successful docking this evening.
Вопрос Роба Невиса, представляющего телевидение НАСА для...
Question.
Well, it's just great to be back here, right, where we landed on Expedition 6. That was a little bit of a surprise for us. We were expecting to return to Earth in a space shuttle, but we had problems with the space shuttle at that time, and our Russian partners were there for us, and they brought our crew home, and for the next few years they handled all the rotations to the International Space Station. So I'm well aware of their professionalism and the way they stand up during times of adversity. And this was just a wonderful experience to watch another launch, a beautiful launch. It just makes me wish that I'd had a chance to launch on a Soyuz myself. I would love to have a chance to do that someday, but I think I'm getting too old for it. We need to let the young people do that.
Конечно, я хотел бы сказать, что действительно было прекрасно сегодня наблюдать.
I wanted to say that as I was observing the launch, I was very happy to see it.
Я запускался на шаттле, и, конечно же, тогда наш российский партнер должен был садиться на шаттле, но произошла проблема с кораблем-шаттлом, и я садился на корабле
«Союз». And instead of landing on the shuttle, I had to land on the Soyuz.
And again, that was just a playback from a press conference from a little bit earlier today, that involving Dmitry Rogozin, the head of Roscosmos, and Ken Bauer-Sachs, former NASA astronaut and the current acting associate administrator for human exploration operations for NASA. Right now, though, on board, they're still moving through those leak checks. In the meantime, we do have some time, so why don't we answer a few more Twitter questions. Again, if you have a question, use the hashtag AskNASA. Try to get through a whole bunch of them during this hatch opening broadcast. First one comes from Matt, who asks a very pressing question. Is there a reason why it takes about 2 hours from docking to open the doors and say hello? Well, it's precisely due to what they're doing right now, and that is leak checks. So they have to pressurize the vestibule. It's the space normally exposed to the vacuum of outer space that's directly between the Soyuz spacecraft and the International Space Station, and they do a series of leak checks just to make sure they have a very tight seal, as you do not want to open up one of those hatches potentially exposed to either vacuum or a pretty significant pressure difference, as that could potentially damage hardware or even injure crews. So that's why they're going to go through and do all of these leak checks and make sure they're ready to open up the hatches when the time is right. And we're actually getting treated to some live video right now inside of the station. This is a view inside of the Zvezda service module, looking all the way back to the aft portion of the station. And you can see Alexei Ovchinin, the current station commander there, getting things ready, the camera set up, and that's looking directly at the hatch on the station side behind him. So in just a little while, we'll be seeing 3 new crew members coming through that hatchway. For now, though, let's get a few more of these Twitter questions in here. We have one from Guido, who wanted to know if the crew members were staying in their chair for the entire 6 hours. They do typically have some time to get up and kind of stretch their legs a little bit, so they're not in the chairs the entire time that they're flying up. It is nice to keep in mind, though, that the 6-hour flight, much shorter than the old 2 days. They used to be the standard approach. They do still have the option to default to a 2-day rendezvous with the space station if there's any issues with those initial burns, but arriving in 6 hours, vastly preferable, I think, to getting there in 2 days. But they don't have to stay in the chair the whole time. They do have the capability to get up and go into the orbital module if they should desire, but not too much moving around necessary, as they are pretty busy during that 6-hour flight on the way to station. Next one comes from Crafty Reddit, who wanted to know what happens when an astronaut gets sick or injured in space. Let's hope this doesn't happen. I agree. Do they get medical training to handle these types of things themselves? Yes, they do. Crew members, if they do get sick or injured, all get some very basic first aid and medical training. They also have direct ties to doctors and physicians down here on the ground who can provide real-time advice. They have a suite of different medical instruments and devices like ultrasounds if things should become serious. And if an injury or sickness is serious enough, they do have the option to get back into those Soyuz capsules and actually return to Earth and get on the ground within just a couple of hours. So there are a lot of options. We do obviously go through a lot of different procedures to make sure the crew is healthy and as protected from injury as possible, including being in a quarantine, which this crew was in for the last 2 weeks prior to their flight, just restricting the amount of people or the amount of chances really to introduce any contagious illnesses to these crew members before they go up to the closed habitat of the International Space Station. We'll get to some more Twitter questions in a little bit. For now, though, my favorite colleague, Rob Navius, is standing by down there at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. He's there with friends and family from these crew members, and he's also there with a special guest, NASA's International Space Station Program Manager, Kirk Shireman. So let's send it down to Rob now in Baikonur.
What time is it? 2:16.
Here in Baikonur, some 25 miles from the launch site where Jessica Meir, Oleg Skripochka, and Hazza Al Mansoori took off in their Soyuz MS-15 spacecraft about 7.5 hours ago, bound for the International Space Station. We all saw that very smooth and effortless docking of the spacecraft to the station a short time ago. And as we prepare for hatch opening and an opportunity for friends and family to talk to their loved ones as they enter the international complex, we have the program manager of the International Space Station with us, Kirk Shireman. Kirk, thanks for joining us in the wee hours here. Your thoughts as you saw the spacecraft take off just after sunset, rise into daylight. It was quite a thunderous opportunity.
It was fantastic. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful launch. What was exceptional tonight was that you could see the ISS fly over just a few seconds before launch, and so you could actually see the rocket chasing after the ISS. So a really exciting time. I had a great opportunity the night before. I was standing outside, the ISS was flying over, and standing with Jessica. And it was weird. We were looking there and watching this beautiful light fly across the sky, and she says, I'm going to be there tomorrow. So it was great to see it fly over today and watch the rocket go on its way, and we're really excited about seeing this crew on the International Space Station.
So many activities are on tap for the space station. The crew is now 9 people for the next 8 days, of course, but once the off-going crew comes home, just a boatload of activity lies in the offing for the remaining 6 crew members. Just give us a sense of how complicated the next several months are going to be.
Well, sure. As we talked a little bit before, we have 5 EVAs to replace some batteries that are coming up on the Japanese HTV. We have about 5 EVAs to repair the alpha magnetospectrometer, which will be coming up, and all that's probably before the end of January, end of February. So quite a few spacewalks. There's still 169 different investigations, 50 of which have never been performed on ISS. So this crew is going to do all those spacewalks, all those investigations, and still keep that big mechanical vehicle up there in great shape. So they have their work cut out for them, but I know they'll have a chance to look out that window and see the Earth going by and enjoy what their time up there as well.
You know, we talk about this often, but next year marks yet another milestone for the station, 20 years of a permanent human occupancy since Bill Shepard and Sergei Krikalev and Yuri Gudzenko arrived on board. I'm always struck by the fact that an entire generation lives today that has never known anything but a permanent human occupancy in space. How you've been with this from the very get-go. What strikes you about all that?
I think about the same thing all the time too, Rob. Of course, it was great tonight. Sergey's with us and sharing even this launch with Sergei Krikalev, who was really part of the very first expedition. But my own daughter was just an infant. I can remember in the very early days of space station, we'd have meetings and I would have my daughter there in a bassinet at some of our meetings. She grew up in the arms of our Russian colleagues and as well as our own. So it really is part of our family. All the work that's been gone on, all the flights to ISS, it really is just an amazing experiment, amazing expedition to be part of, and I'm really, really pleased to have been I have a small piece in that. I think it's got many years left to go, and so what you're seeing today, this launch today, and the work that this crew is going to do is really setting up for the future of not only the International Space Station, but also international cooperation.
Great, thanks, Kirk. So this global outpost in orbit, about to expand its population from 6 to 9. We're looking forward to hatch opening, and Dan, we'll throw it back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
All right, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Kirk. Always great to hear from you guys. Hope you're doing okay with the long hours. I know it's a very long day for everybody over there, as it is already Thursday for our friends over there in Baikonur, still Wednesday afternoon for us here in Houston. If you're just now joining the broadcast, though, we are still standing by the crew going through these leak checks. They're getting reports down to the ground of the different pressure variances that they're seeing. Again, they're working to pressurize what's known as the vestibule. It's that space between the two hatches on the spacecraft, normally exposed to the vacuum of space. They actually introduce some air from the space station itself to pressurize that section, give it an atmosphere. And once that's complete and the pressures equalize on either sides, they'll get ready to open up those hatches. And while we continue to wait for this hatch opening, again, we're tracking originally around about 4:45 p.m. Central Time, 5:45 p.m. Eastern for that hatch open, but we'll keep an ear out for how these pressure checks are going. Let's do some more Ask NASA questions. Again, if you have a question, head over to Twitter, use that hashtag AskNASA. This one comes from Aaron, whose 10-year-old main daughter wants to know what Jessica Meir, studied in order to go to space. Well, it's possibly not what you might think. Jessica Meir holds a Bachelor of Arts in Biology from Brown University, a Master of Science in Space Studies from the International Space University, and then a doctorate in Marine Biology from UCSD, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So she was a very science-focused, a lot of her postdoctoral work studying different animals, such as diving emperor penguins and elephant seals in extreme environments, so places in the Arctic, and also going through phases of extreme oxygen deprivation. But she was a scientist, born and bred, and a lot of your astronauts come from different folds of the cloth these days, as you run the gamut from everywhere from scientists to medical doctors to test pilots and members of our armed forces. There are a lot of paths these days if you do want to become an astronaut. Typically, you do have to stick to the math and sciences fields to become one, math, science, and engineering. But if you go through one of those, you are well on your way to becoming an astronaut like Jessica Meir. Our next question comes from Taj. He wanted to know why the launch was scheduled in the evening rather than in the morning. Fortunately or unfortunately, these launches are all a matter of orbital mechanics. If you actually heard Kirk talk about how the station passed right overhead as they were getting ready to watch the launch is timed to where the Earth is in rotation and places the launch pad in Baikonur right in the orbital path of the station. That's what enables the Soyuz to get there in just about 6 hours. And so the launch time of day pays no attention to what time it is on the ground. It all comes down to where the station is and when it's actually passing over that launch site. Our next question comes from Priyanka, who wants to know when we will see commercial space travel and get a chance to visit the International Space Station. That second one might be a little bit longer lead item, but we're already seeing commercial space travel take flight. We had that first flight with SpaceX's crew capsule, the SpaceX Dragon, a little bit earlier this year in March, which was the first run without crew on board all the way up to the space station of that new spacecraft designed to carry humans from U.S. soil once again. And then along with SpaceX, Boeing also working on their CST-100 Starliner spacecraft. Both vehicles in the kind of end stages of getting ready to once again start launching astronauts. Aside from them, though, a number of commercial space ventures, including Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, also in the mix. So I think it would be safe to say within the next couple of years, you will definitely see an uptick in commercial space travel, and maybe one day you get to visit, maybe not the International Space Station, but a number of other stations that could potentially be in low Earth orbit. Our next question comes from Sika, wants to know how many people could stay in the space station. Is 9 the maximum? 9's not the maximum. You do start to get to your maximum around 9. There are some constraints with the life support systems and how much carbon dioxide you're able to scrub out of the atmosphere. The most we've ever had on station at once was 13. That actually took place back during the shuttle program when 7 astronauts arrived on the space shuttle and 6 were already aboard the space station. But you also had the shuttle and its systems to help manage all of that life support. So 9, not the maximum, but 9 is definitely not something we're set up to support for extremely long durations of time, as right now 6 is typically the maximum you'll see for months at a time on board the station. Keep in mind 9's only how many we're going to have up there for about 8 days. Our next question comes from Furjam643, wanted to know how do they get food in space? Who delivers it? And the answer is several people deliver it right now. We have a number of different cargo craft, which are actually the main way to get food up to these crew members on board the International Space Station. We have 2 commercial providers here in the U.S., SpaceX and Northrop Grumman, who fly their Cygnus spacecraft. And then there's also a number of different craft from our international partners. Our partners, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, just launched a cargo craft a little bit earlier this week that, among the several thousand pounds of supplies, is carrying a sizable amount of food to the crew on board the space station. All of their food is designed to last for much longer than the food you or I are used to seeing in your local grocery store. They'll go through a number of different procedures, either with radiation or with other thermostabilization, freeze-drying techniques to make them what's called shelf-stable, so that they hold their nutrition, their taste, and their ability to be eaten for anywhere from 2 to 3 years. And we typically keep a large reserve of food on board the space station several months in advance of the next cargo flights, just to make sure we're always stocked for our crew members on board. Just checking in, our leak checks are continuing through, so we're just continuing to stand by, everything going smoothly with that so far. Again, we're tracking the hatch opening in about 17 minutes or so per the timeline. Could be a little bit longer depending on how these leak checks progress. So as those leak checks continue to progress, we will take some more Ask NASA questions. Again, if you have a question, hop over to Twitter, use that hashtag AskNASA, and we will do our best to get to it during today's broadcast. As you can tell, we do have a little bit of time between right now and when those hatches pop open, so we might as well be answering any burning questions that you have out there on the Twitterverse. Our next one coming from Anne wanted to know, how does the communication between the astronauts and the Earth centers, so the mission control centers, take place? Well, it actually uses a system of satellites that we have in orbit, known as the Tracking Data and Relay Satellites, or TDRS for short. The astronauts on board have antennas that communicate with those satellites that then beam a signal back down to the ground that gets fed to a relay station out at White Sands, New Mexico, and then gets fed over to us here in Houston. So that's how we're able to talk to them. We have almost complete coverage around the planet with these satellites, so we're almost always in conversations with the astronauts. We do have a couple of minutes, as we saw during docking, that those antennas could actually get blocked, or there are other people using those satellites, or we're just handing over from one to the other. So it's not totally constant, but it's very close to being 24 hours a day, and can be bumped up extremely close to that if we're doing a high priority operation like a spacewalk. Our next question comes from Khalid bin Ahmed, and he wanted to know, can a normal person like me that did not study about space be a part of NASA? You can absolutely take part in everything we do by following us on Twitter, but if you want to just get involved with space, absolutely encourage you to look for jobs in sectors that might be in your country. As you can see with today's historic flight of Hazza Al Mansoori, the first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, more and more countries have more and more opportunities in space. Countries like Israel and India recently getting flights up there and aiming for places like the moon. So absolutely encourage you to look around. There's much more than just NASA taking place in outer space, and we do work with countries all around the globe. The International Space Station, kind of the hallmark of international cooperation, and a whole bunch of different countries coming together to work on common goals. So there are many ways besides just working at NASA. And even if you didn't study about space, I didn't initially study about space, but here I sit talking about space to all of you. So absolutely look for opportunities. You never know where they might lie. Our next question comes from Gibby, and she's 11 and loves space and wants to know what the favorite meal on the International Space Station is. Well, I actually just talked to one of the lead food scientists just the other day and was told that the #1 requested item on the menu is tortillas. They don't get a lot of bread products on board the International Space Station. Crumbling is a concern when you're in microgravity, so tortillas are one of the most used items. In fact, they actually have to take it out of their survey questions sometimes, because otherwise that's all anybody ever says is their most used item. So tortillas are most popular item on board the space station, used in just about every meal for these crew members. And then our next question comes from Paul. He read that the systems on board the space station create an atmosphere and environment similar to Earth. Is working on the space station similar to working in an office on Earth, but in zero gravity, or is it very different? The atmosphere is about as close to Earth normal as you can get. It's pressurized to 14.7 psi, which is the same pressure we have at sea level, and it has the same mix of oxygen and nitrogen and other breathing gases that you experience down here on Earth. Microgravity obviously is a big difference from working in an office. Things don't tend to float off your desk in your office here on work, or at your work here on Earth. But that is something they have to look out for on the space station. Your tasks obviously are going to be very different on the space station. The amount of work that you do, they're typically working in a 12-hour workday with breaks, exercise, and meals spread throughout. And then it's a very intense 6-month to a year long detail for these crew members, so it can definitely be some pretty arduous conditions working on the International Space Station, but they are backed up by an amazing team down here on the ground to help take care of them every step of the way and make sure that their experience on board the station not only productive but great for these crew members living and working in low Earth orbit. And we'll take a short break from Twitter questions now. Again, if you have any, use that hashtag AskNASA, and we'll get to as many as we can as we continue to await these hatches being opened between the Soyuz spacecraft with Jessica Meir, Alex Kripochka, and Hazza Al Mansoori, and getting ready to welcome them on board the International Space Station, where we will go from 6 to 9 crew members. This is Mission Control Houston. If you are just tuning in, we are still waiting for those hatches to be opened up. The crew still moving through the leak checks. Again, making sure that they have a tight seal between the two spacecraft now connected, the Soyuz and the International Space Station, and making sure that area in between is pressurized correctly. They're going to continue doing this, and we'll get some views hopefully from back inside the space station. We're currently in what's known as an LOS, a loss of signal. So just a few minutes ago, we were talking about how we communicate with the International Space Station and using those satellites. And we actually do have a program here in Mission Control where we know up to the second just about when we're going to have that video and audio communication. And so we are expecting to get that back in about 9 minutes or so. We should be hopefully getting that view back inside of the service module that the current station commander Alexei Ovchinin had set up. But again, for now, Jessica Meir, Alex Kripochka, and Hazza Al Mansoori still inside of their Soyuz spacecraft. This is the chance for them to get out of those Sokol launch and entry suits, which if you've been following along, like I'm sure you have the entire day, we saw them get suited up a few hours before launch, before making their way to the pad and getting into the Soyuz spacecraft. This is their chance to get out of those. Those are just the protective suits that they wear for what we call the dynamic phases of flight, so that initial ascent and the flight to the International Space Station. They're going to get a chance to change into a little bit more comfortable clothing, their normal flight suits, and then we'll be able to see them open up the hatches and come out. And then just a few minutes after they're able to come on board the station, we'll be able to set up a call between friends, family, and well-wishers who are braving the very hard early morning hours over in Baikonur and are eagerly awaiting a chance to see these faces on board the International Space Station, and they'll get a chance to talk to them. So, as always, a special shout out to all of our friends, family, and colleagues over there in Baikonur watching along. Hope you're staying up okay, and hope you got a nap in your not too distant future. And pretty soon we'll have these crew members on board the International Space Station. So we still have some time before the hatches get open. Again, those leak checks still underway. So let's get back to some hashtag Ask NASA questions. Keep sending them in on Twitter, and we'll keep answering them as long as we have until those hatches are open. Our next one comes from Sapa, wants to know, when will NASA totally discontinue using the Soyuz as a means to get to the station? Well, we're not going to. Once we actually start flying these commercial crew vehicles, the plan calls for both nations to continue launching these spacecraft. That way we'll also be flying mixed crews, so you'll always have a NASA international partner and Russian on our commercial spacecraft, and then you'll be able to have a NASA astronaut on the Russian Soyuz. This way, no matter which spacecraft is flying, you always have a good mix of those international partners on board the station, and it actually comes in operationally, as you do want to have a NASA astronaut on board to take care of the U.S. segment, as we do get some specialized training for either the U.S. or the Russian side of the space station, depending on where you're from. So we're not going to plan to totally discontinue using the Soyuz. We'll just be expanding our fleet of vehicles carrying crew members to the station. Great question, though. Our next one comes from Diana, and this is one we've been getting quite a bit. Where will Hazza stay once docked to the station, American or the Russian module? A lot of you have also been sending in questions about where are the crew members going to sleep, because 6 is definitely the normal for us, so having 9, we have a couple of people that don't necessarily have beds. Hazza will be in both the American modules and the Russian modules. He's got a number of tasks that will take him throughout the entire space station. We do only have 6 crew quarters on board the station, so they do have some temporary areas set up for the crew members that are designated sleeping spaces. Hazza's is going to be in the FGB. It's the Zarya module. It's one of the 2 main modules over on the Russian segment. The other newly arrived crew members are going to stay in a couple of different spaces. Oleg, the Soyuz commander for today, is going to be in the service module that they're currently docked to out in the open. That's where 2 of the other sleeping quarters are located. Jessica's actually going to move into Nick Hague's crew quarters, as she's going to be swapping out with him, and he's going to be heading home coming up on October 3rd, and Nick will be camping out in the GEM, the Japanese experiment module. So some temporary locations for all of these crew members, but they'll all have plenty of space for over the next 8 days, as we do have 9 people on board. All right, our next one comes from Jennifer, who said, I didn't realize today was Ask NASA Day. I think every day is Ask NASA Day, but these 5th graders are super excited. Maynard is going to the space station, and the high schoolers want some data on training. What's the least amount of training to go to space, and what's the most? Well, probably the least is for some of the past spaceflight participants. You'll hear that word get used for Hazza. That's just to differentiate him from the expedition crew members, like Jessica and Oleg and the other crew members currently on board that are staying for an expedition which travels for several months as opposed to just a few days. Spaceflight participants will still undergo several months of training, as we do need to make sure you are safe and aware of all of the different emergency procedures if you're going to be staying on board the space station. So just a few months is probably the absolute minimum for specific mission training. The most is most of our expedition crew members who are staying on board again for 6 months or up to a year. They'll train for about 2 years prior to their flights. Now keep in mind, these are professional astronauts that are doing this training, and just to become that professional astronaut, you go through several years of training. So it's not a short road, but I think going to space at the end of it definitely makes it worth it. And we are now hearing that those Soyuz leak checks are just about complete. So we'll stand by now. We should again be getting that video back in just a couple of minutes. We should be getting close to the hatch opening.
МКС СУП Москвы в канале СГ-2 для Александра и Алексея по открытию люка. Ребят, будьте готовы, сейчас с минуты на минуту будем открывать станционный люк. И можно включить камеру телевизионную.
Сейчас. И можно включить камеру телевизионную. Можно включать камеру, уже рекомендую, да? Включаем?
Да, можем включать камеру, но пока вы на большом экране не будете, просто на маленьком экране, на большом мы вас переведем, как только откроется уже корабельный люк.
Да, и хорошо.
Ребят, ну и напоминаю, что репортаж у нас будет в SB1.
Big screen as soon as the Soyuz hatch is open, so we can watch everybody line up. And we will return to Space to Ground 1, where we'll do all the talking during the PAO event, up and down. Space to Ground 1, copy, for PAO. Station Moscow on Space to Ground 2.
Называет.
FYI, Oleg is calling you on Space to Ground 1 if you're not monitoring.
Армата ЦУПа Москвы.
Отвечаем.
Давление в ОБ 740 с половиной.
740. Еще с половиной. Принято.
Давление в орбитальном комплексе 738 с половиной. Подтверждаю.
738 с половиной. Принято. ПВ-1 у нас закрыт.
And this is Mission Control Houston. If you're just joining in, you're coming in at the right time. We are getting very close now to this hatch opening. They're right now equalizing the pressure across the station with that vestibule hatchway. Again, the vestibule, the space between the hatches on the station and the Soyuz. All right, and getting our live views back inside the International Space Station. You're about to see a lot of people, as we haven't had 9 people on board since 2015. But for now, Alexei Ovchinin there on the left, Christina Cook there on the right. Behind Alexei is the hatchway to where the Soyuz is currently docked, the very aft end of the Zvezda service module.
Stand by.
Inside the pathway there, you can see Alexander Skvortsov working to get the hatch on the station side open. Again, there's 2 hatches. There's this one on the station side, which you can see him working on. That'll get swung inward, and then there will also be a hatch on the Soyuz spacecraft itself, and we should be able to see that opened after the station side. And just like that, looks like the station side hatch is open. And there you can see this, the very top of the Soyuz, which was used to dock a little bit earlier. That hatch will be opening up next. And once that's open, we'll see these 3 new crew members arrive on board the station.
Illuminated. Affirmative. Copy.
And standing by for Soyuz hatch open.
Люк ОБ СУ открыт.
SU station hatch is open.
У нас идет выравнивание давления.
We are still working on pressure equalization.
Сармат Москвы.
Sarmat, Moscow.
Отвечаем, по Москве.
Go ahead.
После выравнивания давления
794.
Pressure is 797.
принято.
Copy.
Значит, после выравнивания давления разрешаем выполнить открытие переходных люков.
You are going to open the hatches and translate to the station after the pressure equalization steps are complete. Copy.
Смотрите действия по странице 82.
Please also go to page 82. You will need to deactivate all com assets.
КСДСУ.
Install
Блоки очистки атмосферы.
SDSU cap and deactivate purification units in the BO. Copy.
Переходных люков мы с вами связь закончим.
After you open the hatch, we will say goodbye and we will hand you over to Moscow Mission Control. And Hazza, Jessica, Oleg, best of luck to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ждем выравнивания давления.
We are still standing by for pressure equalization steps completion. Copy.
После выравнивания давления также не забудьте закрыть ККТ и закрыть КВД.
Don't forget to close KKT and KVD after pressure equalization is complete.
Продолжается выравнивание давления. Текущее давление 773.
The current pressure is 773.
Принято.
Copy.
And this is Mission Control Houston again, just standing by for one more hatch to open up. The hatch already opened on the station side, just waiting for the pressure to equalize, so making sure the pressure is as close to the exact same inside the Soyuz and in the station before they open up that final hatch. And at that point, Jessica Mir, Oleg Skropochka, and Hazza Al Mansoori will make their way into the Russian segment, that Russian service module, and join the crew already on board the station. So eagerly awaiting that. Should be coming within the next couple of minutes, so stay tuned, and pretty soon we'll see 3 more people float into their home for the next 8 days for Hazza and the next 6+ months for Oleg and Jessica.
Текущее давление 760.
The current pressure is 750. Copy.
давление по мануалкометру.
The current pressure is 750 for the MV. Copy.
ЦОП Москвы МКС ВСГ-1.
Moscow Station, Space to Ground 1. Go ahead.
Все, мы Слышим вас хорошо, ВСГ-1.
We have reconfigured COM and we can hear you loud and clear.
12 миллиметров.
Delta P a minute ago was 12 millimeters.
Принято.
Copy.
Дальше продолжаем, теперь ВСГ-1.
Okay, so we will continue our communication on Space Ground 1 now. That is correct, Alexei.
Хорошо, принято.
Copy all.
$744 миллиметра по мановокометру.
Принято.
And we're just continuing to stand by until that next hatch gets opened. NASA astronaut Nick Hague peeking into the screen at the bottom right corner there. In the background, you can see floating on the left there's Alexei Ovchinin. He's the current Expedition 60 commander of the station. And on the right there's Alexander Skortsov. In the background, the black and silver piece, that is the hatch on the top of the Soyuz spacecraft. We are just a few minutes away from seeing that open up, and 3 new crew members, Oleg Skripochka, Jessica Mir, and Hazza Al Mansoori, making their way onto the station for the first time for Jessica and Hazza, and for the 3rd time for Skripochka.
Олег Иванович, какое давление еще?
Oleg, what is the current pressure reading?
$743.
743.
Принято.
Copy. 742. This is the current pressure reading, and it looks like it is stable. Copy. Oleg, go ahead and close ККТ and КВД valves, and you're go to proceed. ККТ is closed. КВД closed. LED S4.
And looking like the pressure readings are good. Should be seeing that hatch open now.
S4 is not illuminated, correct? S4. S4 is not illuminated. Copy. Okay, I'm opening the hatch now. And it's moving. Okay. Latches are unlocked. Rollers have moved to the side, and now I can go ahead and open it. Copy.
And there we see the Soyuz hatch open. So the hatch opening coming at 5:12 p.m. Central Time, 6:12 p.m. Eastern Time, with the space station flying 260 statute miles over the Indian Ocean. The hatch now open. The MS-15 crew going to make their way out. First through the door, Oleg Skropochka saying hello to the International Space Station for the third time in his career. And just behind him looks like NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, the first-time flyer, saying hello to some of her fellow Ascan crewmates and some of the cosmonauts already on board, making her first flight to the station. And there we see Hazza Al Mansoori in the background. Last but not least, all 9 crew members now inside the Russian segment aboard the International Space Station. We'll give them a minute to say hello to each other. Some of these crew members have trained together for years, haven't seen each other for months, now reunited 260 miles over planet Earth. We'll give them a minute, and then in just a little while we'll set up and have them talk to friends and family back in Baikonur who have been watching the day's events unfold.
When should we start our PO? Guys, we need to get a wider angle so that all of y'all can fit in the frame, first of all. And then as soon as you've done that, we maybe go to start. Okay, so pretty much right now? Yeah, let everybody take their positions, get their headsets on, make themselves comfortable.
Алексей, ракурс хороший.
Alexei, great angle right now, and framing.
По готовности можете вызывать Байконур.
Whenever you guys are ready, go ahead and call Baikonur. Moscow Station, Space to Ground 1, we're ready for the PAO.
МКС вызывает Байконур.
Station, calling Baikonur.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event? Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Yeah, we're ready.
Baikonur, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Rob Navius with your colleagues, families, and friends in Baikonur. How do you hear me?
We've got you loud and clear.
Okay, let's kick it off here.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome up to the station. It was fantastic to see they take off. And now I wonder, how did you feel during the journey, and how about those knees?
It's a little bit hard to believe that we're here. It actually felt a lot like being in the simulator until things started moving, and then we started noticing the view. And it's interesting because we were pretty busy, so it's easy to just get in the moment and forget exactly what we're doing until we looked out the window and I looked at Hazza Station and floating tablet. It's pretty surreal to be here now, but we feel great.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Hi, Jessica. This is Raquel. We were so happy to see that you all arrived safely and are joining the amazing crew that is already there.
This is an LOS. How long? Find out how long before we require.
And this is Mission Control Houston. We are going through a quick handover. We'll get that comm back momentarily.
We lost you for a minute there. I think we're getting you back.
Safely, and now you're together with the rest of the amazing crew at the space station. I was wondering what was going through your mind as you were experiencing the launch, and whether, despite all the training, was there anything unexpected?
Just a few. I mean, there were a couple of things I didn't expect. I didn't realize there was going to be some more interference on the radio. I don't know how often that happens or not, but obviously it never happens to us in the simulator. So it was interesting listening to other conversations, and we even heard an ATIS report from an airplane and an ILS approach, and I felt like I was back in the T-38. So just some kind of small details like that we hadn't ever experienced before in the simulator. And then, of course, all the feelings. I think for me, as it was described by several of my classmates, you just sort of feel suddenly like you're hanging from the ceiling, and then that just persists. But I think it's going to feel normal pretty soon.
Jessica, hi, this is Josefa. So proud of you, love you so much. It was incredible to watch you take off, and I was also looking for NASA has trained you so extensively in so many simulations. There must be something that still surprised you, or that they just couldn't really relay in a simulation. And how did you feel looking back at the planet?
it was really one of the first images I had. It was just the sunrise was just approaching, coming up, and I could see this body of water in the distance, and it was glowing red from the sunrise. So that was a pretty spectacular view for the first one. And then really just the formations of the clouds were really, really thick, and it was a little bit, Hazza and I were trying to figure out exactly where we were, but our view wasn't that great from our seats where we were, so we couldn't quite nail it. And we're going to practice with our geography a little bit more up here. Maybe with a better view from the cupola, we'll be able to nail it.
Привет, добрый вечер, брат Джон здесь.
Привет, это брат Джон.
The space?
Do you like it in space? Right now my brother is speaking Russian.
Everyone's very impressed up here, Johnny. Oleg is about to answer. He thought it was for him.
Oleg has asked спасибо.
Thank you, Oleg. Anytime. Wonderful pronunciation, by the way. Just top notch.
Hey, Jess, it's Becca. I was sitting here. And I had a thought. You are so far away, however, you've always wanted to do this all your life, and I feel like when you arrived, you must feel right at home, and then seeing all your classmates, even though you're far, you must feel so at home.
It really does, and I think it's going to feel even more so really quickly here. But coming in through the hatch and seeing all these familiar faces, and it's really interesting because I've been seeing them on the other side of the screen for so long. But yeah, I think it feels like home already. It's going to be an amazing 6 months.
الو مرحبا هزة تسمعني؟
مرحبا.
حالك عساك بخير؟ ألف مبروك على أداء المهمة الوصول.
Speaking Arabic.
الله يحفظك ويردك سالم وبشرك لمعه. يسلمون عليك.
مرحبا يا محمد، والله يسلمك وانا سعيد بسمع صوتك، وكان ودي صراحة اخلي الناس كلها تشوف المنظر اللي شفته انا، منظر عجيب صراحة. الارض والغياب والشروق اللي شفناه خلال الرحلة، كانت رحلة 6 ساعات، كانت ممتعة صراحة. والحين بنبدأ ان شاء الله المرحلة الثانية من المهمة على مثل محطة الفضاء الدولية. سلم على قادتنا، على شعب دولة الإمارات، على الوطن العربي كله، وأقول لكم نحن الحمد لله بخير، وإن شاء الله قدامنا مهمات وتجارب علمية إن شاء الله، ونشارككم في هالتجارب مع هالطاقم الرائع.
إن شاء الله الله يوفقك إن شاء الله. ركز على أداء العمل وأداء المهمة، ولا تفكر في شيء إلا في أداء المطلوب منك. أسأل الله يوفقك إن شاء الله ويردك سالم.
إن شاء الله. مشكور يا محمد. سلم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك هزة. نحن وايد فخورين فيك. حكومة الإمارات وشعب الإمارات كلهم يشوفون إنجازك اليوم، كلهم يشوفون حلم زايد يتحقق، وانت طموح زايد، وإن شاء الله ترد لنا سالم غانم، وإن شاء الله ما ترد لنا الخبر طيب. نترياك كنا على دولة الإمارات. الله يحفظك.
جزاك الله خير يا أبو سالم. مشكور. سلم على شيوخنا، على قادتنا، على حكامنا، وعلى شعب الإمارات والوطن العربي. وطموح زايد اليوم وصل الفضاء وعانق النجوم، وإن شاء الله هاي بداية مراحل جديدة ومهمات أخرى إن شاء الله.
Hi Jessica, it's Greg. First I want to say the look on your face when you came out the hatch was priceless.
And I hope that the entire 6 months feels like that for you.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure it's going to.
Hi, Jessica. It's Mel. I'm honored to represent the group of dear friends who have come together for this extraordinary experience. In fact, we've become an extended family, and the words of Shakespeare bear repeating. We can no other answer make, but thanks and thanks and ever thanks.
How did I know Shakespeare was going to appear again? Thank you so much, Mel. I'm so glad that all of you guys were here. It made me so happy seeing all the pictures of all your smiling faces. Thank you so much to everybody for your support.
Okay, and back here in Baikonur, we'll wrap it up. Since we're running just a tad late, we want to wish you all safe travels. Fly safe. We'll be sharing your exploration with the world as the months and weeks go on. And we'll turn it back to Mission Control in Houston. Thanks so much, crew.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event.
Thank you to all the participants in Baikonur. For the ISS, welcome on board, and we'll resume operational space-to-ground communications.
And this is Mission Control Houston. Just like that, 9 crew members aboard the International Space Station. It's been a long day, but it was a successful one, delivering Alex Kropotchka, Jessica Meir, and Hazza Al Mansoori safely aboard the International Space Station. We're going to have 9 people on board over the next 8 days before the departure of 3 of these crew members, Alexei Ovchinin, Nick Hague, and Hazza Al Mansoori. They'll be making their way back on October 3rd. Over the next 8 days, though, it's going to be jam-packed with a lot of work, and then after that, the speed really picks up for the Expedition 61 crew, which will formally start after Ovchinin, Hague, and Al Mansoori depart, including a number of spacewalks coming up in the next month or so to install batteries, and then a whole bunch of spacewalks later this year to go out and repair and upgrade the alpha magnetic spectrometer. So with as many as 10 spacewalks on the near horizon for these crews on board, the endless amount of research work always taking place on board station, and any other repair jobs and things like that crop up along the way, going to be a very busy fall on board the station. But today is a great day. We have 3 new crew members on board the station, 9 crew members in total for the first time since 2015. I do want to thank you for joining us for all of our coverage so far today. Thank you for all of your fantastic Ask NASA questions throughout the day as well. And be sure to continue to follow us on social media, and follow all of these crew members on social media. Just about every single one of them has an account, and you can find those across the NASA websites, or go to the @NASA_astronauts account to get a good plethora of all of their different tweets, and you can go find them. And that's the best way to see what it's like to live in space every single day. For now, though, we are going to wrap up our final bit of coverage for this evening. Thanks again for watching and tuning in, and we'll be back next time with more action on board the International Space Station. For now, though, we will sign off one final time. This is Mission Control Houston.